This is the OverReaction podcast.
Darrell,
Jeremy,
how's it going?
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you again. It's been a little bit.
It has been. You're doing well?
I'm ambulatory. As long as you can get up and move around, right? What do you have a complaint about? So what are you up to? What's the latest?
Well, I'm having a little fun, Jeremy, trying to use
yeah?
AI to do some tax preparation.
Oh, that's fun.
But everybody tells me that don't rely on it fully but it's just kind of fun playing around with it. I'm not a big fan of tax season, but it's kind of fun to go in there and start asking AI some questions about it and see what they kick back for answers.
Yeah, I saw a couple posts from people. That's what they did. Like their accountant did like the first run and they took it.
Yep.
And then they fed it into, I think, Grok or ChatGPT or something like that. And it found stuff that their accountant missed. And they're like, come on, man. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything. It is what you make of it, but it is kind of fun to see what it kicks back. That's for sure.
Yeah, I found it to be pretty useful for me for doing like research and looking up, like, especially fact checking, just because there's so much misinformation or you don't even know what's true or what's a deep fake. So I'm like, hey, what is this? And I like that it can cite the source and you can go back to the source. I don't inherently trust it, but it does cut down on a lot of like research and due diligence grind. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I haven't done taxes, and it's really good for like putting together quick contracts and say, hey, we need to change an SLA or we need to come up with a different NDA or whatever, because it sources from thousands and thousands of other companies that have uploaded NDAs. And it's like, so we don't go to our lawyers a ton anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I, if we got to issue more shares or all this is like super basic stuff, it's completely templated. Yeah. Right. I'm like, why am I dropping $700 an hour for something that this can do in like a minute, And then of course, if it's anything really serious, like fundamental change, of course you want your lawyers to review it.
And it's only going to get better. I had my wife and I were traveling to Barrington, Illinois a few weeks ago, and we ran into some plastic thing that was in the middle of the highway, and it popped out of our car, part of our front grille that covers this piece of our bumper. And so I took a couple pictures. I took a picture of the left side that says, here's what it should look like. And took a picture of the right side with the missing part, put it in the chat. And I said, here's my car. Here's the age, the year of my car. Here's the make, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, oh, you're missing the blah, blah, blah grill cover. Da, da, da. And in a matter of 2 minutes, they gave me the part number from an Audi OEM dealer at the best price. I ordered it, got it delivered to my house, popped it in my car, and boom, $160 later, it was done.
Yeah, and if you took it to mechanic, it would have been $500 to $600 minimum, right?
Totally. Yeah. So there's some good things for it.
Yeah. I posted a thing to LinkedIn a couple of days ago about, so like 1/3 of people are using AI for like just quick medical search.
Right.
And then I kind of facetiously or sarcastically just said, well, and the other 2/3 are using Gemini and they think they're just Googling, right? So they so they're actually are really using AI. But yeah, it's just it doesn't replace real expertise. In fact, I saw a post, someone wrote an article about the coming boom for consultants that are going to be helping organizations really put in AI and use it the right way. Like the whole thing, it's like out of the box, you can just start rocking and rolling it across any enterprise or any business is obviously fallacious.
Yeah.
So let's kind of delve in. Like you started when you came out of university, you went straight into healthcare and tech, right? I mean, it was kind of a.
Well, I didn't. So I went into university for chemical engineering, and then I decided I didn't want to do that. So I graduated with a really boring degree called mathematics and economics. And so I went into banking actually, and did commercial lending for about 3 years. You know,
Oh,
Jeremy,
I thought you went straight to GE.
no, I was in banking for about 3 years, and I was really good at it, but banking is really boring. You know, it's just so cut and dry, and it's so highly regulated. I just like, you know, you can't have a lot of creativity in banking. Well, I should say probably legally. You can be creative, but it'd be illegal creativity.
Yeah, I think Enron and Bernie Madoff,
Yeah.
some of those guys can get pretty creative.
If you follow the regulations, it's a boring industry.
Yeah.
So then I did a startup, a manufacturing startup in the filtration industry, which is interesting. And I think that was probably I always tell people I kind of have 3 MBAs. I have my formal MBA, I have my startup MBA, and I have my GE MBA. And each one of them taught me something different. But man, if people can have an opportunity to work for a startup, I happened to work for a company that was competing against some really big companies like 3M, for example. And you really learn how to disrupt markets and really fine tune your value proposition when you're competing with the big boys. And I learned a lot, and I did that for about 8 or 9 years. And then serendipitously, I got into healthcare. I've always been kind of a data math, data modeling guy. And back in the late 90s, I had this epiphany of applying data modeling to healthcare, and that's how I ended up at GE.
And which part of the GE superstructure did you start with?
I started off in the patient monitoring group. So that was back in the day. So this is 25 years ago. I mean, Jeremy, we started this conversation around AI, and it's funny because 25 years ago, GE and myself and the roles I was in, we were using pattern recognition and data modeling 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's obviously much more sophisticated, but it's been around for a long time. And the problem to solve back then was we started building out wireless data infrastructures to collect patient data. And so if you remember the days where remote ICUs and remote telehealth and all that stuff, centralized monitoring became popular in the early 2000s, that's what I worked on back then.
And then you're GE how long before you jumped to Medtronic?
So I was at GE from 2000 to 2007, and then went to Medtronic, was there from 07 to 2019.
Gotcha. And were you marketing? Like, how did you get into marketing? Some with the mathematics and economics background is, I mean, I think there's a saying like, what do you call an accountant with no personality? And it's like an economist, right, or a mathematician. So I mean, how do you go from?
Well, the funny thing is that I talk to people about this a lot, especially younger people are looking at. I think marketing is probably one of the most misunderstood domains from a career perspective. I think people think of marketing as brand and demand generation and, going out there and messaging, et cetera, which it is all of that stuff. But one of the things that I found is that companies were really bad at was strategic marketing. And you can't be a good marketer if you don't have the strategy first nailed. And what I mean by that is, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, Jeremy, is that I've been at really big companies and smaller companies, and I've consulted with a lot of people. And I will go into these companies or to the boardroom, and I'll ask them, what problem are you trying to solve in the market? Okay, great. You have a marketing group and you're pumping out a bunch of messaging and all that type of stuff. I find a lot of times they don't even know what problem that they're trying to solve. And even if they then say, well, this is the problem we're trying to solve, I'll ask them, why can you solve it better than your competitors? What's your secret sauce? What's your differentiation? They really struggle with that as well. So I'm like, okay, you're going to go into a boardroom and you're going to say, buy our product. And they're already probably using some of your competitors to solve the problem. And you can't articulate why your solution is better. And third, how you're going to add more value, disproportionate value today to what they're using versus what they can get from using your product. So when I say I'm a marketer, I start with strategy first in defining and answering all those questions with clarity. Then once you get those things outlined, then you can go out and do your targeted segmentation, your value proposition, your messaging, et cetera, et cetera. You can't ignore the first part and be good at the second part.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I've seen that quite a bit because the main people that, well, I'd say there's two main groups that we were like my company works with, I work with. It's usually marketing leadership, and then it's like customer leadership, et cetera. And what's interesting is the really good, successful marketing executives have your similar mindset where they're like, hey, we need to get our ducks in a row first. We need to understand from a strategic standpoint, why should anyone take a second to look at us or our products? Like, we got to understand their motivation, but first we got to understand our motivation, because we don't understand that. What does it really matter? But what they've found, and I think you've experienced this a couple of times, perhaps, and I don't want me to put words in your mouth, is that oftentimes, like the CEO or the president or whatever, is just more like, they don't say it. They're just like, just shut up and go put together something, right? Rather than like, why are you acting almost as a management consultant or strategic advisor right now? And it's because we need to understand, like Clayton Christensen talks, what's the job to be done? Like what is the outcome? I find that the same thing. Like, we have a platform and people can use it, et cetera. But we tend to get a little involved in trying to understand the motivation and, well, okay, why you're trying to launch this research, or why are you trying to run this marketing campaign? Like, what is it you're trying to do?
Right.
Like, what meeting did it come from? And the really good strategic people will go, oh, that's a good question. Here's why. We had a board meeting or something happened, and this is what we need to understand, or this is what we're trying to do. And then we're like, oh, okay. Well, then you might want to change a few things. But a lot of times they'll just basically say, just shut up. I don't really care about your opinion. We're just going to launch this thing. We're like, okay, that's fine. But I mean, how often have you seen it where you get a little bit of pushback on it? Just stay in your lane, Darrell. Like, what are you doing stepping out of your lane?
Internally? I mean, with the companies that work
for? Yeah, internally.
I've got pushback a lot. And what I would say by that is that there's the intellectual nodding the heads like, I get it, I hear what you're saying. And then there's the actual implementation of the intellectual. And that's where I think where a lot of things fall apart. Because when you have, and I don't know the percentages, but you get the point here. When you have 95% of people doing it the incorrect, the lazy way, and you got 5% of people that are trying to get the 95% of the people to think differently and act differently, you get a tremendous amount of resistance. You really do. And that's why, when I talk to people, the companies that have worked at, they had all of them had opportunities to crush it. What prevented them from crushing it was their own not getting out of their own way. I mean, not fully embracing, to doing things in a different way. And there's so many really good companies out there. But if they just would listen to the customers more about not only what problem that they're trying to solve, but why they can do it better. Even if you're lucky enough to get into a company with your solution, and if you listen to those customers on how they're using your product and how you could make tweaks or small little R&D changes or development changes to make your product that much better, those companies will be forever loyal to you. But the arrogance of not listening to your customers and going out there and doing something, buying a company that you shouldn't be any business in, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's where I found that they just started tripping over themselves, and they just started making mistakes because they just weren't sticking to the fundamentals and listening to their customers.
Yeah, it's kind of your first part of your, the summary that you just did, kind of resonated with something that I'd read a few years ago. And I can't remember, I don't know if it was the Stanford MBA program or one of them. They did this internal kind of case study where they had all the different MBA students in the program, and they broke them up into groups, and they had different tasks they needed to accomplish. And they split it. I don't know if it was like 10 and there were 5 on one side, 5 on the other, but whatever the breakout was, in the control, one of the groups, they specifically had strategically told one person within each one of those groups, your job is to constantly challenge, not in an aggressive way, but constantly challenge the assumptions of everybody else, right? The other group didn't have any of those people. Well, in every case, the group that had someone that was their job to kind of challenge and think outside the box outperformed the groups that didn't have it. Mm-hmm. But then when they implemented the Survivor Series strategy, who you could vote out of the island, every group voted out the person that was most essential to the success of the group.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen it. I have lost track over the last year and a half, Darrell, of people that I've known in the industry who were really good. They were arguably the most important executive within a startup or a bigger company. And then they get laid off, and then I'm like, I'll do a call with them. Hey, what's going on, Cheryl? Catching up. And she's like, I don't know. I mean, I grew doing, kicking butt, et cetera. I did a little rip, and I got let go, which is weird. It's the first time in my career. And you would think in a time like this where you need every kind of advantage that you could get, that companies would hold on to their most successful people, they're proven performers. What we find is that the desire for unity and we just want to keep going. Stop. Let's just keep going, right? Yeah. Nothing stops this train, this money printing train, so to speak. We're just going to keep going. And then these companies consistently will get rid of some of their most important people because they don't just toe the line. Like, they actually do care about the customer. They really do care about the success of the company, but they're viewed as some sort of malcontent when they're not at all.
Yeah, conformity it's a poison. It really is. And it's ironic because our country, we talk so much about, I think people talk about diversity, and one of the things that it's fine to talk about diversity, but I think so many people apply diversity to race, gender, sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. And mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that people are missing on diversity is diversity of thoughts and opinion.
Sure.
And when you really, truly have a culture that's embracing the obvious diversity, but you're also embracing people that think differently, to your point, they should be embracing those people and say, wait a minute, I didn't even think about that. Where in the heck are you coming from with that thought? Let's kind of drill down on that, because that's something that I have not heard before. And to your point, most organizations kick that to the curb and they embrace conformity, which I don't get.
Yeah, and I see more of. I certainly see it at the startup realm, but I see way more of it at bigger companies, because the startups, they're so desperate to survive, unless you're like some of these giant AI or hyperscalers where they're getting funding to the tune of a small sub-Saharan African country's GDP. Maybe there it's a little different, but your normal startup, even if they get tens of millions of dollars in investment, they're scrapping for survival. So they're like, we're literally looking for the best idea. I don't even care anymore where it's coming from. So they seem to embrace it. But then inherently, as those companies get bigger, and Steve Jobs talked about this before he died, may he rest in peace, and you have other guys like Musk and just a bunch of other people that will talk about what happens as those companies get bigger. Well, then they bring in the managerial class. And when you bring in a managerial class whose job's just managing, and I think you've seen it too, and you don't have to name names, but I don't have any respect for executives or VPs that don't get their hands dirty anymore. No. All they want to do is just manage teams of people. They're not talking to the customer. Right. They're not talking to a partner. They're not getting out and being on a couple sales calls just because they want to keep things fresh, right? And they're conscious that if I stay too removed up here in this corporate ivory tower, I'm disconnected from the people. I'm disconnected from the customers. I'm disconnected from the front line. I remember it's kind of a interesting story. So my family, my dad's family, my grandpa, my great uncle, they started a trucking company out in the middle of nowhere, Canada, where I grew up. And then my dad ended up taking it over, and he had this interesting philosophy where even his CFO and his chief legal counselor, et cetera, had to go spend 2 weeks a year out on rig moves. So out in the middle of the Canadian tundra on, one of those dangerous jobs out on rig, because he's like, everybody needs to know what we do.
Right.
It can't just be the truckers and the mechanics and the welders that are, basically doing everything for the company. All the executives, the managers, they actually have to experience what everyone else is. And they ended up being really successful because of it. And it always kind of stuck with me, regardless of what company or how many people worked for me. It's like, no, I still want to, I want to be in the dirt sometimes. In fact, my problem is I want to be in the dirt all the time. Yeah. And it's people saying, okay, stop. You need to get out of our way. You're kind of messing with things. Have you seen kind of similar stuff?
Totally. And when I was in my jobs, if I saw the marketing people that were on my team and I saw them in the office all the time, I would ask them, tell me what customers are you going to go visit in the next 30 days? And if they looked at me and said, I don't have anything on my, I'd say, you need to go out there and visit some customers. And I don't want you to go to the safe customers. This is where you come in, your company comes in, is it's always kind of baffled me why marketers always want to go talk to the happiest customers. Why wouldn't you go out and talk to the most dissatisfied customers?
Because they're putting together their case studies and their luminary accounts, right?
Yeah. So then I'd see their trip reports and they say, oh, I went out and visited customer XYZ. And I'm like, guys, this customer loves us. Why wouldn't you go talk to this other customer who just, is unhappy with us? Well, I don't. So to your point, kind of maybe going full circle, is that when you're battling against conformity and you're going out there and talking to upset customers, I think the safest route is to not rock the boat. Go out there and talk to happy customers. Go out there or inside, align with everybody else, because then you're in the group. You don't have to, fight the, go upstream. It's like, that's the thing that it kind of beats you out of you. And then this is what I tell people that are in their 20s. And like, don't conform. Just there's too much conformity out there. Go against the norm. Don't follow the herd. Try to be passionate about something and do something what you believe in, because people are going to try to beat it out of you for you to conform.
Yeah, I remember back when you were at Cerner before the Oracle acquisition, and I swear, outside of Travis Dalton, I don't think anybody spent more time talking to customers, even though that wasn't your responsibility. I mean, I would get emails from you or text when you're in some hotel room somewhere and you're going through, hey, Jeremy, I've read all these things about this customer. I'm going to go meet them. And I in the back of my head, I'm like, is he the chief customer officer too? Because you just would read through reams of customer comments and asking questions and what do we need to do? And then reaching out to customers and visiting with customers, not just at the trade shows, but just something you were doing all the time. And of course, I'm like, this dude's never sleeping. He's a chief marketing officer, but he's kind of acting as, head of customer success as well. I mean, so yeah, I mean, you're completely right. And I think everybody should be meeting with the customer. Something I try to do, I need to do more of, is I get my head of R&D on 1 or 2 sales calls a week. And then he gets on a call once or twice a week with our head of customer success with our customers, because, and he's really appreciated it now. I think he thought we were a little bit nutty at first, but now he's like, okay, I kind of get why you bring up the things that you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, you have to eat your own dog food. Yeah. Like you're building this, your team's building the platform, you're doing this kind of thing. You can't be removed. you can't just listen to the suggestions that I have or person that's running customers and getting it. It's like drinking water further down the stream. And as someone who grew up out in the sticks, you're going to try, if you're going to drink from a stream, it better be close to the source. Yeah. You don't want it kind of meandering through a pasture and et cetera. So it's, try to get my team. And even sometimes some of our developers, I'm like, you need to be on a call. You don't have to say anything. In fact, probably better if you don't say anything, because it would reveal your, your antisocial behavior. But so just listen in on the call. But I think that's what you kind of exemplified so well is here's someone who's, and I don't mean to puff you up like this, but you're one of the few executives that's not over the customer, who's obsessed about what the customer's doing. So why do you think that's so rare? Why do you think that your approach, which is really successful, is just more the exception than the norm?
Well, to go back to, I'll answer that question in a second, but to go back, I want to make sure that one of the things that I learned early on, and this is what marketing is all about, I think that people use the term customer very broadly. And when I talk to people that work for me or I work with them, I'll ask them, they'll say, yeah, I did a customer visit. And I'll say, well, what customer did you go visit? I visited, hospital XYZ. Why that hospital? Why that market segment? Who did you meet with when you said you visited the customer? Well, I met with the chief medical officer. Great. Why did you choose to meet with the chief medical officer? Why are you not meeting with people that actually use the product? Do you even know people there that have influence on how our products get purchased? I mean, so you ask these questions, and 99% of the time, might be exaggerating, but the vast, vast, vast majority of the time, they can't tell me why they chose that customer to go visit. They can't tell me why they chose to go out there and visit that particular marketing segment or market segment. They can't tell me why they really chose to meet with that particular customer. So what I found most valuable as a marketer was go out there and talk to people who actually have an opinion about the products or services that you sell. If you're going out there meeting with C-suite people all the time, but they're not using your products, well, okay, you met with a customer, but what did you learn from that? And if you're going out there meeting with all customers that are happy, what are you learning from that? So to go back to your point on the net promoter score, so many companies and so many people know, well, maybe they kind of know their net promoter score, which is fine. It's a number. But what your company does is where the gold is the comments and what people are saying about, why they gave you that score. And when you go in, to your point, you're right. I've been in Excel spreadsheets where I've gone through and I've read thousands and thousands and thousands and I read every single one of them. And you'll have names of people, you'll have phone numbers, you'll have emails, and they'll say, I've completed this survey 6 years in a row and nobody, here's my phone number and here's my name, and nobody ever comes back to me. And so I would just call them up and I'd say, hey, Jim, this is Darrell. I'm new to Cerner. It looks like here that you filled this thing out a whole bunch of times and nobody's ever got back to you. Nope, nobody's ever got back to me. Well, here I'm getting back to you. Let me have it. What do you like? What do you don't like? And so the other piece of it, as a math person, way too many people make decisions off of N of ones or N of twos. Yeah, and you can't do that. You got to get N's of 25, 30, 40, 50, whatever the number is. So if Jim is saying something and like, I haven't really heard of that before. But if Jim is saying something where 50 other people have said it, I'm like, okay, there's something here. And then all of a sudden you find out that Jim is complaining about wait times when he calls into tech support. And then you pull the data and saying, yeah, tech support wait times are not meeting our goal. Our goal is make it up 4 minutes. And people are having to wait for 12 minutes. Then you elevate it to your executive team and saying, is this what we want? Do we want 12 minutes? By the way, here's all the data. Jim plus 50 other people are saying that they're waiting on average for 10 minutes and they're hanging up. Then you got a problem to fix. that's where I think that I really, you kind of start picking at the onion and you start peeling it back. And then you get to problems that you can solve that can impact your customer and your brand and your loyalty.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this was probably 10, 11 years ago. There was one of our first customers, and big global company, huge. I think they're number, well, they're top 10 in market cap right now. I'm not going to mention who they are. And they wanted us to run their global voice of customer program. We're like, okay, fine. So we're running it for them, and it was pretty good. And we ran it for like 4 years. By the second year, the end of the second year, their response rates had dropped off pretty significantly. And we're trying to do everything. So the customers don't know we're involved. They were transparent. We're just running the program for them. And so the CEO calls us up, like, hey, your system's not working right. We're seeing a pretty big drop in response rates. We used to get a ton. Now we're getting like half. And I said, yeah, we're seeing the open rates are still really high. Inboxing rates are really high. So it's kind of odd. Let's try some things up. And so I asked him, said, are you okay is if I email and do calls with, a dozen or so of your customers and just let them know, hey, XYZ company's actually been using our platform. I just want to understand how it's gone, just from like a generic usability perspective. And what I found to each one of them, to your point, Darrell, probably wasn't 12 calls, maybe it was like 9 or 10, is they said, yeah, I'm like, yeah, the survey comes through, it looks fine. The feedback, it's whatever. It's not a technical issue. It's like, why am I going to spend 60 seconds or 2 minutes or 30 seconds to give them feedback when I hear nothing? Yeah. I don't know. Was my feedback valuable? What are you doing with it? Come back to me. Like, return and report, nothing. And so all of them said that exact same thing. So we took it to leadership and said, I didn't realize that y'all weren't doing anything with the data, that you were keeping it within a little team. And I don't know what you're doing. And then I come to find out that they would just do a quarterly little presentation or MPS or our CSAT or whatever's this. Here's some things we need to work on. And it was a tiny part of the meeting, Darrell. Yep. It wasn't like a prominent thing. Right. And I started to contrast that with like Epic. And, I'm no super fan of Epic. I admire a lot of things they do. I don't think they're as good for healthcare as a lot of people think. But the thing that Epic does is, from the beginning, they obsess about the customer. Yeah. Obsess. Right. Because they realize if you lock down your customer base, you play super great defense. Right. Like we just saw in the Olympics. The U.S. beat Canada in gold because their goalie was out of his mind. Like everything, played brilliant defense.
And they won 100%. They won 100% on the penalty kill. I mean, yeah, they had this. They were doing the basics.
Yes, and that's what the best companies by far do, is they obsess about, to your point, the customer. Yep. Because then the customer promotes you like crazy, and they're not out there trashing you. And so you're not having to play, while your marketing and sales is playing offense, they don't also have to play defense because they're having to counteract all this negative stuff that's being shared with them. And so we've had to start building in our platform like auto alerts that says if there's a bad score, you're going to get an email whether you want it or not, because you may not want to do the right thing, but we're going to try to have our platform make you look at the garbage that you're doing and hopefully take some sort of action. But it's too bad that it's a black hole.
Right.
And it shouldn't be. It's like, I checked the box. And so like to these customers that I was telling you about, I understood, like, if you're never going to do anything with the data, or at least I don't know of it, like, come back to me. Like once a year or twice a year, say, hey, thanks. Here's what we've heard from you and the rest of the customers. Here's what we're trying to do. At least I know I didn't waste my time.
Yeah, totally. And can you imagine if at the highest level, Judy calls up, make it up, Intermountain Health, and says to the CEO, hey, I just want to let you know, we received some feedback on our Net Promoter Score that we let you down. And so I got my team looking into this to figure out how we can make it right. We don't need to give you all the details. Here's some of the information, but this has my visibility, and we're going to make sure that we make it right. I mean, to that point, I mean, people are going to be like, oh my God, the CEO is on top of this? And you know what? That's a phone call that would take, what, 3 minutes? You don't have to do a phone call. You can just do an email to the person and say, hey, by the way, FYI, I'm on it. I saw this, blah, blah, blah. Those things are so incredibly valuable.
Well, she does that. I know Judy and Carl, the kind of the two founders, they do calls with the leadership teams of every one of their customers a couple times a year, personal phone call. That is so different. And what's interesting, I'm glad you brought this up, because I've had two or three kind of like throw my hat moments where I just, after the call, I'm like, I can't believe I just heard it. And I brought up what you'd said. And I'm like, why aren't you doing a call, at least a call once a year with all your customers? Like, and they said, well, I'm too busy for that. Like, how would you expect? No one should be able to expect. I'm the CEO that I should have to do that. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm hearing what I'm hearing. Am I really hearing what I'm hearing? Yeah. You're too important. You're too important to just do one call a year with all your customers. Well, we've got 1,000 customers. I'm saying you're not doing all the calls at once. They're not an hour call. It's 15-minute calls. You should have a couple calls a day with your customers. Like, then everything. You're sending a message that no one's below me. I care about you as a customer. It sends a message to the rest of your team, your company. Go, I don't want to get biblical. It's like, go and do thou likewise, right? Like,
and going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, I'm not quite sure what everybody's dashboard is, and everybody probably needs to have a different dashboard. But to your point, I hope that senior leadership team knows, what are my top 10 revenue producing customers? What are my top growth, increase of revenue customers? What are my customers that have declined in revenue over the last 12 months, 12 months, 24 months? What are my most profitable customers? If you don't know those things, top 10. So I just went through top revenue, top growth, top decliners, and top profitability. Let's say that they're all unique, that there's nobody on the same four. So you got 40 different customers that you have to call because there's no duplications. How long would it take to call or email or build a relationship across 40 customers? Not that long.
No.
But how many people do it? Not enough.
Oh, it's so rare, Darrell. Like, I can honestly count on one hand of hundreds of companies I've talked to where except for the startups, so the small companies that only have a couple hundred employees, only got 100 customers or something like that. The second they get bigger and they got a couple hundred, it's gone. Like, the CEO will do a call only if there's a major fire, or they'll meet them at a trade show or a user event. Then the rest of the time they're obsessed with raising money, hiring, doing press tours, talking to the streetos, all that kind of stuff. And then slowly but slowly, there's two key cohort groups that get ignored: the customers and the rank and file employees. They're almost like the unwashed masses, which is really odd in the dynamic. And that shouldn't be, but it really becomes that way.
Yep, agreed.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about strategy, because you jumped, which is interesting, from being the marketing leader and product leader at Medtronic, and then being chief marketing officer at Cerner, and what fun time that was. And then jumping over to RLDatix and not necessarily marketing, but being chief strategy officer. What kind of prompted that, switch it up?
Well, it goes back to, it's funny that when I talk to people that are looking for chief marketing officers, I always preface this and say, can I define to you how I define marketing? And we already talked about it. And I talk about, you can't be a good marketer. I kind of break it up into two different halves. I say there's what I call the downstream piece, which everybody kind of can get their head wrapped around pretty easily, using social media, messaging, branding, blah, 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 demand generation, et cetera. And every single person I talk to about, I say, that to me is like easy to do if you get the first half done well. If you don't do the first half well, the second half, I don't care how well you try to do it, it's not going to work. So the strategy, I'm a strategic marketer. And so from even when I was in banking, I've always been strategic in how I operate my business relationships, always. And to your point, the strategic piece of being a business operator means you strategically have to add value to the customer market segment that you're delivering product or services or solutions to. And if you don't strategically understand their business and their problems and what value you can create for them, you're not going to be successful, period. End of story. So I learned that really well in my startup. I think GE brought a whole different level of operational rigor to that. Medtronic was fantastic around being a strategic marketer. I brought that to Cerner and I brought that to RLDatix. So my titles changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, I was just talking about this with somebody else. You probably know this. The buzz right now in the private equity world is they want to hire chief revenue officers or chief growth officers.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the title of being a chief revenue, a general manager, a chief growth, then they don't want to talk to you. So I was talking to this person. They said, well, you don't have, this, growth officer revenue. And I said, it's really funny that you say that. And they said, well, why? And I said, since 2000, so for even before that, so I'd say since 1992, the year my daughter was born, so 34 years, I have traveled around the world and I've met with C-suite, board executives on strategic selling. I have been a salesperson for 34 years as a strategist, as a strategic marketer, as a chief marketing officer, never had the title of being a chief growth officer. I said, but when a salesperson had a really complex sale to do, who was the first person they called? Darrell Johnson. I went in there and I did the strategic sell to the board of directors, to the C-suite, et cetera, et cetera. So was I the salesperson? No. But when we won the deal, we won it in partnership between strategy and sales. So to answer your question is that people get really they kind of get really all wrapped up in what's your title and
Yeah.
Why do you have this title? I basically boil it down to a really simple thing. I'm a business person and I look at strategically how to help a customer grow their business through products, services, or solutions that we can offer. And you got to mix into that whole piece of it, the marketing piece, the strategy piece, the sales piece, et cetera. That's what I'm really good at.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to imagine that most of the people that you run into that can't think in more strategic terms like that and connect the dots probably haven't been an executive in a real business before. Probably been in finance for a long time, got their MBA in finance, and it's just they've only worked for a venture capital or a PE firm because they would know that. You would explain it. They go, okay, I totally get it.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I agree. And I think you mentioned a couple of really good folks out there. I always tell younger people, I said, what, go out there and listen to Simon Sinek, go out there and listen to Steve Jobs, go out there and listen to some of these people, because I cringed I would go out there and I'd watch executives with pretty successful careers and I'd go watch their presentations and I would cringe. They would talk about the company and here's how great and wonderful we are as a company. Here's the products we have, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and we'd leave the meeting and I'd say, did you even get a feel for what problems and what issues that they have? So all my meetings that I started out with, and to the opposite, going back to the 95% of people would cringe on how I presented. But I would go to present to the board and I would say, here, before I talk about our company and what we do, let me just kind of just baseline and understand where we're at. I believe I'm here today in front of you because I believe that you have this problem. And this is a problem that you're trying to solve right now. with this type of solution, and it's usually a competitor. And what I'm hearing from your executives is, here's some of the struggles that you're having. Am I correct? Am I aligned with what your problem is, what you're struggling with, and how you'd like to have things fixed? And then sometimes it gets fine-tuned. Yeah, you're 95% of the way there, Darrell, but this is like, okay, let's tweak it a little bit. Okay, so now let me summarize what I think why I'm here. And then people would say, yep, that's why you're here. Okay, great. Let me now switch gears a little bit to talk to you about why I think our company can help you solve this problem. It's a total different approach, but every single time that I did that, it worked incredibly well. And how many executives don't do that? I don't know why.
Yeah, that's a well said. So when it comes to strategy, what all goes into being head of strategy? Because I think it's one of it. It has to be the least understood role in a company. Because if you're like, oh, market, okay, I'm marketing, I'm head of sales, I'm head of product, I'm head of legal, I'm head of HR, whatever. But strategy seems to, unlike a lot of other roles, encompass sometimes be super narrow focus, and other times it bleeds in and the Venn diagram overlap into sales and marketing and operations, et cetera, and product management for sure seems to go over that. From your mind, what is kind of ideal responsibilities for head of strategy?
Well, at the simplest, there's a couple of things. So let's assume strategy is it's an investment of resources, and it's an investment of resource to get a return on those resources. And you have to understand what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. And strategically, sometimes it's just as important to figure out what not to do versus what it is to do. And I can give you, remind me if we have some time to go back to it about Medtronic and the diabetes market. So that's kind of at its highest, level. Then what I would do, and I would say, as I go into any company that I talk to or I work for, or I even try to understand, I try to understand what markets do they serve today. Some of those questions are, why are you choosing to serve those markets? And remember that secret sauce piece. If you're going to serve a market, your goal is to be the leader in that market. At least it should be. I mean, that's what Jack Welch was all about. Well, I'm going to be number one or number two.
Yeah.
If not, then why am I in this market? Because you're most likely not going to extract significant profitability unless you're a leader in the market. So now if you're going to devote resources to a market, and then you have to ask yourself, why are you in this market? What am I doing better than our competitors? Do you have the core competencies to really be a winner in that market? Then it's a lot about what we talked about before. Why are we winning? Why are we losing? And strategically, it's investment of resources, so you win more than you lose. I mean, it's about as simple as that. And go back to the Cerner piece. Cerner was really good at acute hospital electronic healthcare records. Epic started out being really good at ambulatory healthcare records, and they both kind of had their win spots. Well, what happened is that the market evolved where ambulatory and acute kind of became one, and they had to exchange data more fluently. So the strategic piece of that whole part was, boy, we need to strategically figure out how to amp up our ambulatory piece. We can't ignore it and only just focus on the acute side. That's a strategic problem to solve. And you know how that all unfolded.
Yeah.
Revenue cycle management, the same thing. As you look at, okay, I can have people in acute hospitals document what care was delivered for the billing purposes, for quality. But if I ignore the revenue cycle management piece, strategically, what's that going to do for a company? Well, that's a strategic problem to solve. That's what strategists do. They figure out what markets are we in, why are we winning, why are we losing, how can we win more versus lose more or lose, and then also strategically, do we want to get into other markets? If we choose to get into other markets, why do we think what we're we have these core competencies over here? Why do we think we can apply those core competencies over here and win in a market that we're not in? Well, let's strategically walk that through and figure that out. So that's what strategists do all the time.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you brought up kind of the chief revenue, these different titles. Like I've made fun of what I think is executive leadership inflation of different roles. So what's the difference between a chief revenue officer, a chief growth officer, a chief commercial officer? And then does that encompass marketing or not?
Usually does not encompass marketing. And it's usually
so those three exactly the same. They're just fancy.
Typically they're the same. You have a leader that's responsible for growing the revenue of the organization for a specific territory or region. Yeah. Now you might have somebody that from a growth officer that might have something around partnerships or acquisitions or those types of things, but typically they're all the same of how do you grow our revenue base.
I don't understand. I just make fun of the flavor of the month titles. Like I see it in hospitals now, and they've got CIO and then CDO and then CDIO and CHCIO and Chief Innovation Officer and then Chief Transformation Officer, Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Chief AI Officer. In fact, I put out a post about this and I got called from a CIO and he's like, hey man, it's not cool. And I'm like, no, explain to me. You're the CIO. Shouldn't everything fall under you? If it's anything IT related at all, they should just be VPs under you. What is this? See this and see that and see everything. It's like a kid's book. Like it's just so, and at the end of it, he kind of agrees like, yeah, I guess you're kind of right. I'm like, this is just like the problem with healthcare right now. Like how many executives and then SVPs and VPs and directors and can one hospital possibly have? Yeah. So when I start hearing the chief growth officer, chief revenue officer, chief business officer, all this stuff, I'm like, oh, come on, what are we doing?
Well, it's when you think about all these titles, you think about there's people that are responsible for, but I think that all executives should be aware of. And that's, so was I, these companies I was in, it was my responsibility as an executive to understand how things would impact the organization. Even though I didn't have responsibility for it, it was my responsibility to be aware of. And I think if I wanted to be if I wanted to understand things more, to understand the true risk or opportunity, then I would go to the people that were responsible for, and then be more and have them educate me more on what the risks or opportunities are. But I think to your point that there's swim lanes, and there should always be swim lanes. But as an executive of a company, if you're on their executive committee or the executive team, you need to be aware of all these issues that can impact your brand and your growth and your risks, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. So we only got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else we didn't talk about we forgot to delve into?
Well, we didn't forget to do, I think from my perspective, you and I have had a lot of conversations around just healthcare in general.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, Jeremy, I'm fascinated. I'm still a little intrigued on if I really want to be a cynic of the U.S., healthcare piece. I don't think I think we have a healthcare industry that spends a lot of money on taking care of people that have symptoms and are sick. I just really wonder, what's it going to take for human beings to take full control of their health, so that they can use data. My big thing right now, as you probably know this, is that you've always probably heard that hypertension is the gateway to cardiovascular disease. I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been interviewing hundreds of people, and this whole thing around GLP-1s and weight loss, et cetera. 99% of the people that I talk to have a scale in their bathroom.
Yeah.
And they weigh themselves. So I'll say, well, does that mean you're healthy? Or how do you determine your health? And with blood pressure, high blood pressure being the gateway to cardiovascular disease, nobody, if they don't have high blood pressure, nobody that I talk to has a blood pressure cuff in their house.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why not? If you have a scale, why not go out and buy a $70 blood pressure cuff and take your blood pressure and monitor your blood pressure and make sure your blood pressure is under control? So I don't know what your thoughts are about, but I just find it really intriguing if AI, I don't know what's going to help people really truly get control of using data to manage their cholesterol and their blood pressure and their blood sugar levels, et cetera, because I just don't see it really changing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think part of it might be with some people is almost like the Google Facebook effect, like where it's if I do this, it's going to get to my doctor and then it's going to get to the drug companies and then it's just going to be there's going to be selling me stuff, right? Again and again and again. I don't know how much of it is that.
Yeah.
I think during the COVID era, a lot of people became a little bit more like, whoa. So there's, I think, that a little bit of lack of trust, but I'm with you where it's the more data you have on yourself so you can take control of your health so you can live longer and be healthier makes all the sense in the world. And I wonder if too if there's also just too many gadgets. Like someone's like, hey, you got to put this on your finger and you got to do this and that. So I think if someone figures out a way to make it simplified, as much as like you're saying AI should be able to help with it, I think you'll get more people that will take that more serious. As long as I think it has to be turnkey. It has to be, hey, you're going to get this Bluetooth scale and this cuff, and then there's this simple app, and it's probably going to have to work with obviously Apple Health, et cetera, where it's just. And I know there's companies trying to do it, but then I just don't see it being simple enough for people.
It has to be simple. I agree. And I know that healthcare costs are a huge issue. And a lot of people declare personal bankruptcy because of medical costs. So I get it.
Yeah.
And I talk to a lot of people about their deductibles, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'll ask people, do you have an HSA account? And I say, yes. And I say, what have you taken out of your HSA account for preventable? Like to understand. And they're like, what do you mean?
Probably not much.
Not much. And I said, well, one way to prevent spending money on healthcare is to be healthy. But how do you know you're healthy if you don't measure your parameters of, first of all, define health? Do you know your heart rate variability? Do you know your muscle mass? Do you know your VO2? Do you know your blood pressure? Do you know your cholesterol? Do you know whatever it is that you want to define as healthy? Buy some things to measure it. And if you know that these are the main contributors to cardiovascular disease or to diabetes then use AI to say, hey, here's what my measurements are. And it looks like they're trending in the wrong direction. What can I do to improve this? And put together a lifestyle change. But the people that want lower healthcare costs, they don't do anything to modify their lifestyle, which is kind of fascinating.
Oh, yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, without a doubt. So I think anything where it'd be the big markers, like, hey, you're pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
Because you're pre-diabetic, you can stop. Like you can stop that from going into full-blown type 2. Right. You can actually stop that. Right. So I think that's important too, where it's like people get overwhelmed with data. Like I don't care, like 10 different things I'm having to track. It's be like, what are the 3 or 4 big ones? Like these are the 3, 4 big things you should be tracking. The rest, if something gets to it, you need to look at. Here's the 4 things.
Right.
And I think if it makes them more straightforward to people, you'll get more of them.
Yep.
But again, I think a lot of people, they just don't want to put in the work.
Yeah, and that goes back to full circle, and probably in closing here is that it's so much easier for all of us to conform, if that's the word that we want, but to follow the masses. And I don't care if that's off of TikTok or Instagram or, everybody's on social media, everybody's on LinkedIn. So you got to do that. Everybody's using GLP-1s. You got to do that. Everybody is, it's this massive, those who resist those mass, the herds going in one direction, those are the people that I find tend to change the market.
Amen to that. 100%. Well, this has been great, man. We'll have to do it again sometime, just maybe in the next 3-4 months. I'll put a link to the people that are watching to Darrell's LinkedIn profile so people can follow him. And then other show notes as well. We'll put in there. So anyway, this has been fantastic, Darrell. Really,
thanks for the chat, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Always a good conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. All right. Yeah. Thanks, my man.
Cheers.